Welcome to TGS, Transform, Grow, Succeed, a podcast focused on helping you break down your organization's communication barriers to uncover, discover, and recover the values that guide your work. I'm your host, Tim Gravoy, and my goal is to uncover all of the innovative ways that you can drive meaningful change in your organization and also provide insights on how to implement them starting today. Well, I'm very excited to welcome Ms. Victoria Ann Tullercash to this episode of TGS, Transform, Grow, Succeed. And this is our podcast where we talk about leaders in communities who are in caring organizations doing amazing things for the people that they serve. And Victoria Ann is certainly an amazing person to invite on the show. So the reason why I was really excited that Victoria Ann said yes to this engagement was that Victoria Ann has a really interesting position. They are the Youth Engagement Specialists at Youth on Their Own, which is a organization here in Tucson, Arizona, that supports youth who lack a safe, permanent place to live to graduate high school. What Victoria Ann also does is participate as a member of something called the Youth Advisory Council. And the Youth Advisory Council's job is essentially to run this whole organization that's working to end youth homelessness. Youth really are the driving forces behind everything that this organization does. And it's a very completely different model than the way most of the schools and nonprofits that I work with are organized in terms of how they partner with youth to achieve shared goals. And so the other thing that I'm really hoping that we'll get into just a little bit is, what is it like being a youth as a youth engagement specialist, working in all of these spaces where most of the people who tend to be in charge of things tend to be older than you, to be perfectly honest. And so I guess I'll just start right there. Victoria Ann, I set up kind of the situation, the conversation I'm hoping that we get to have. What of that did I get right? What of that did I get wrong?
So the YAC stands for Youth Action Committee. But besides
so I got
that, you got
wrong. Okay, yeah, Youth Action Committee. Okay, so yeah, I've been working with y'all for like over a year now. That's really embarrassing.
just so many acronyms though in the Tucson collaboration to end homelessness. Just so many acronyms to keep up with. It can be kind of a learning curve. Besides that, you got everything else correct.
All right, fantastic. Well, I'm really excited that we get to have that conversation. In that case, I guess let's go ahead and get started then. Would you just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to this work?
Yeah, sure. So kind of like how I came to this work was actually it was very beginning of the pandemic in around March 2020. I'm like in this program at the University of Arizona called Fostering Success, which is for anybody that used to be in foster care or has dealt with homelessness. I personally grew up in and out of foster care since I was like 3 years old up until like I was 18. And I also couch surfed a lot in high school. So that's kind of my part in that organization. And we're in this group chat. And my mentor, Danny, she sends in a flyer that is from Youth on Their Own and the Youth Action Committee. The first flyer is just, hey, we're looking for Youth Action Committee members. These are our meetings. We're doing them on Zoom. And then a couple of weeks later, I get a second flyer that is Youth on Their Own hiring for a youth engagement coordinator. At the time, that's what it was called. And it looked really interesting. Like the job description was working directly with the Youth Action Committee, as well as like the youth homelessness demonstration project and like all the different change teams, like the education change team that me, Tim, and a bunch of other amazing people are on, and a lot more stuff. And like the only qualifications you really needed was like to be 18 to 24, so around the young adult age, as well as like having that experience of being, homeless or dealing with housing instability like foster care. And I was just freshly 18 and like I was looking for a job in the midst of a pandemic. So I was like, yeah, might as well see what happens. And I didn't hear back from them in a while. And then I get a job interview, it goes well. And then I've been working here ever since. I'm 20 now. So my 2-year anniversary is going to be on the 18th, and I'm going to be graduating soon. So a lot of eventful things. So yeah, that's kind of how I came to be here.
Well, that's just an amazing story. And it's one of those stories of just kind of tactical serendipity almost, where it's, maybe it was kind of luck that the flyer came your way, but it kind of wasn't, because it came to the right person at the right time, it seems. So what, and also congratulations on your upcoming graduation. It's going to come sooner than you think, I bet.
Mm-hmm.
That is really cool. Tell me a little bit about what makes, the youth action committee different in terms of, because you talked about a little bit about how there's all these different change teams. And from my experience, you tell me if this is right or not, but from my experience, these change teams tend to be made up of, people who work in nonprofits or government agencies or schools even. And they tend to be honest, people who are my age. I'm 41 and, and maybe older even. And the Youth Action Committee is not. How does the Youth Action Committee work?
So the Youth Action Committee, basically, there's this whole gigantic governance structure within all the different committees and stuff like that within Tucson Pima collaboration to end homelessness. The Youth Action Committee was formed in 2018 because there is a realization within TPCH, like, oh, we need young people expertise because we are missing something in what we're doing to help them. So then the Youth Action Committee was formed in 2018, so way before I came into place. And the Youth Action Committee is really supposed to be an equal collaborator in all of these decision making that is like specifically for homeless youth, because no matter how many, professional experience or like qualifications you have, at the end of the day, like, I don't know, I feel like well, obviously, like, we're experts in our own way, more like we know exactly what we need help with. Like, personally, for me, when I was a homeless youth couch surfing, and I've advocated this throughout my entire career at Youth on Their Own thus far, is that I didn't know about different services that is like required by law to give to youth that are experiencing homelessness, like McKinney-Vento. No idea what that was at all until I started working here. And now I'm
Okay,
just
so
like,
just for the folks who may not know, also not know what McKinney-Vento is, and this is super important and kind of like a shared mission that you and I have, is to make sure people know what McKinney-Vento is. Would you be willing to just share like just your 5-second version, or I don't know, whatever long you want to tell me? What is McKinney-Vento? What is it?
so another thing too with McKinney-Vento is I'm constantly learning about the different services again, because it's just so new to me that I could have gotten this. But basically, McKinney-Vento is a federal law that like, it gives like specific services like students are required to get if they're facing homelessness or housing instability, like transportation, also being able to get like register for classes, and like if that means having a hard conversation with an adult going like, why do you not have an address in your registration papers, like, you still, like, those adults have to listen and be accommodating towards that. And that is a federal law everybody is supposed to follow. But
so there's a federal law right there that says basically, like, if I were to walk in, if I'm a 16-year-old high school age student and I walk in by myself to the registrar of a school and say, hey, I want to go to school here, I don't have an address because I'm homeless, that school has got to enroll me like right then. Like, they have to enroll me right then, no questions asked, give me a schedule, no questions asked, no vaccines, no records, no nothing. Their job is to get me learning. That's and there's things like they're actually supposed to provide me transportation. Like that means sending a cab to my address. They got to do it. It's actually, the law requires that. And you're saying that, I remember you saying once before that, or many times before actually, that this was something that as a high school student you didn't really know about.
Nope, I didn't know about like any services at all. And honestly, at the time, I didn't consider myself homeless because I wasn't literally sleeping on the street. So I was like, oh, well, others have it worse than me. Like, at least I have somebody's couch I could crash on. But no, that is a
Oh,
real type of homelessness that is defined with again within federal, like that is title 3 homelessness, just that type of housing instability.
and actually, this is maybe a perfect opportunity for me to ask you about this because we got to know each other through the education change team, and one of the things that I think that our team struggled with was what work to do. However, I kind of feel that Yak was pretty clear on that to a certain degree, that the Youth Action Committee wanted the education change team to really take on this issue of educating educators about McKinney-Vento. And I'm not so sure that we got the message really quick. Were you there on that call where we did that kind of that brainstorming session with youth about kind of what services that they would need? And
Yep.
then there was another one, right, that we did before, and it was were you on that one? It was with actually mostly adults and service providers. Yeah.
Yep.
So one of the things that I just remember from that call is like the adults on the call, like the ideas that they came up with were things like, we should build tiny houses for youth. We should create tents on rooftops in Tucson for youth to live in. And then I just remember us like going to the actual youth and talking to youth about that. And it just was like so far off what youth were actually asking us to work on. It was just so really different. And it sounds like that's kind of why this group that's working to end homelessness really takes directions from youth.
Mm-hmm.
What?
Yeah. Oh,
Tell me more all about that. Yeah.
I just wanted to add, kind of like all of those suggestions were very, creative. And also that is something we could work on in the future, but it's definitely like more of like our priority right now is like knowing what's out there right now instead of, wasting our time inventing the wheel. Like we have so many resources we have now that just aren't implemented, or a lot of people just don't know about it. And again, like sometimes situations like that, like it count as adultism. So, like kind of I don't know how to explain adultism other than like, adults thinking they know everything, but when a youth doesn't, that's how I kind of explain it. But sometimes it doesn't come out as like a malicious thing. It can just come out as like being well intent and like really wanting to help youth, but still kind of just like forgetting like, hey, we should probably like ask the youth, make sure like these are ideas they can get behind, or is it something else we're completely missing?
So I love it that you use that word adultism, because that's a word that I'm not sure that a lot of us people who work in schools might even know. Or if we do know it, that we might not, kind of like have that squirmy feeling when we realize that might be something that we're engaging in right now. So that's actually would be a really interesting thing to talk about for a bit. So you've got this youth action committee, and this youth action committee is essentially in charge of everything else this other group is doing to end youth homelessness. That's almost like, I'm kind of imagining a high school where a group of seniors got together and they were in charge of telling the principal and teachers how the school was going to be run.
Mm-hmm.
Like would that be a good metaphor?
Um, that would be a pretty good metaphor. I think it's a good metaphor. I think, kind of the Youth Action Committee wants to have as many like young people with as many diverse kind of experiences and expertise as possible, because like you can have like a group of young people, but the young people probably are all, white or have experienced one type of homelessness, or are like straight and cis. While as like, homelessness is different whenever it intersects with different identities. Like if you are a BIPOC youth, like that's going to be extremely different than how I was dealing with homelessness as a white youth, because I never had to experience any type of like barriers due to, systematic racism and stuff like that. But I have, had to deal with a lot of transphobia and homophobia as a, homeless youth that a straight cis person wouldn't be able to experience and wouldn't be able to relate to. So yeah, we could just have a room full of young people, but we really need a bunch of different identities with different stories to tell. So then we can have the most informed opinions at the table. So then we can really, strive to make changes that are more equitable to everybody, because, homelessness looks different and affects everybody differently.
That's really interesting. I think important in what you're saying is we're talking about adultism as this idea of, I as the adult know how this needs to get done, and you as the youth should be the grateful beneficiary of all of the stuff that I am doing for you. Enjoy your tiny house that I built for you. Just kind of that tiny house example really sticks with me as being like just the most out there, disconnected from what the youth were telling us they wanted to work on, kind of thing. What you're also talking about, it's not just enough to just get youth of a certain age together. It's really important that those youth come from different kinds of places. I'm almost thinking about at schools, like when they do partner with youth, they often choose the student council president for everything, or they choose those I guess good as gold kids for whatever it is that they may want to do. And even the word kids is kind of a form of adultism too. It's not. It on its own kind of indicates that there's a difference in separating there. So I got to be honest, it was really I took a course in adultism actually that Yak recommended I take from there's another organization that I took it from. I'll put the link in the show notes later. But it was a really kind of tough thing to come to grips with. I experienced some discomfort as I went through it because I realized, I've done that as a school principal. I'm wondering, just from your perspective as a youth, and then because you do work for youth on their own, and I would say that as nonprofits go, they're probably more aware of adultism than most nonprofits that I work with. That said, I'm wondering, just in general in your work, I mean, not necessarily like in any one place or wherever, where do you experience that? Like, where do you start to see that adultism is coming up?
Mm-hmm. Well, with my job at Youth on Their Own, I've never really experienced adultism with any of my coworkers at Youth on Their Own. Like, if anything, they've been very, very, staunch advocates and allies for the Youth Action Committee. And for me, whenever we have dealt with adultism in the past, usually when, we deal with adultism, it's more with other, nonprofits or just providers in the community that we work with or oversee. And, it would be a lot harder dealing with that if we hadn't had that, ally in Youth on Their Own, or the allies we have within City of Tucson and TPCH. And also it's like an ongoing thing with adultism, because again, you don't necessarily know sometimes that you're doing it, and it could be in the best intent ever, but it's still, adultism. So it's an ongoing thing of being able to recognize it, and also being able to be an ally and helping, us, stop having that happen. It doesn't just stop at okay, we have made a committee, that's good enough, because that could easily lead to tokenization of oh, well, we have the Youth Action Committee and we brought this to them and they said yes, therefore we are, being inclusive, when really being equal collaborators is having them making whatever policies that we're going through, or really making the guidelines that guidelines for some of the things that we're implementing and stuff. It's very much we have to be equal decision makers, instead of just being we have a Youth Action Committee, that's good enough.
Yeah. So when you're thinking about kind of maybe a school or a university or that, we always talk about, I mean, here's the deal. I'll just kind of some real truth right now. We always talk about as school leaders, how important youth voice and choice is, how important it is to center the voices of youth in our schools and to really listen to youth, and youth are important and all this stuff. And it's clear that we are either completely unaware of how to do it or we're all just lying. It's where we clearly don't know how to do it as school leaders, because by and large, we don't really centralize youth voice to the extent that it is on YAC, for example, where youth really are running the show entirely in terms of what it is that we are doing to end youth homelessness here in Tucson and Pima County. What do you think would have to change at a school for youth voice to be centralized in anywhere close to the way that is centralized in the Youth Action Committee?
That's a that's a toughie. I feel like with schools specifically, it's harder to navigate. Being a high schooler, a former high schooler, as well as just like for a while I was going to college for education, but I ended up doing sociology instead. I think first of all is like whenever like youth are telling you like, hey, something is wrong, like you have to listen, because I know like for most of the schools that I went to, like we had gay straight alliances, but even though we had those clubs, we still weren't really like listened to whenever, like especially the gay straight alliance members specifically were facing any type of homophobia or like transphobia. Whenever like we tell the staff like, hey, this is something that happened to us, it's usually written off as like, oh, well, I mean, your word against whoever else, or did anybody else see it, or stuff like that, to the point where like if we don't have a camera showing what's going on and that it actually happened, then like we get written off. And that's not just specific to gay straight alliances. It's with like a bunch of other, again, different identities. And I feel like adultism plays a part in it, but there's also many other like things that play a part in that, like racism or homophobia or transphobia. All of those different things really intersect together and kind of make that adultism like worse, bigger thing. So I think the first thing is just like listening, and like really listening and not being dismissive right away, like really like going in, because we encourage youth to have an informed opinion, and to look at all of the sides. And it's only like, it is only fair that the adults saying this to youth are also making that informed decision and looking at all of the sides than just what they think they see with their eagle-eye view.
So that is really just very astute, and there's a lot to unpack there. And Victoria, I really appreciate you sharing all of that. Is your experience with being a member of the Gay Straight Alliance, really kind of highlights that there's adultism, and that's something that we really got to work to avoid. But when we've got systemic homophobia, systemic transphobia, systemic racism, endemic and part of our schools, and our youth who are experiencing all of these things are telling the adults in charge that is going on, then the first way of addressing adultism is to believe what youth are saying. So that's I mean, am I getting that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really important. It's I just remember the course that I took on adultism that the YAC recommended was really great. And it really came down to that same thing, just what you're sharing too, is that when you say something, listen to what they say. And I'm just thinking that's kind of how the McKinney-Vento video that we're working on right now is coming about, is that the one thing that the youth on the Youth Action Committee wanted the education change team to do more than anything else was to make sure that everybody knew that McKinney-Vento was a thing and who qualified for it. That at least from I remember, I think it was you even said this, that, hey, I knew how to sign up for the football team if I wanted to, but I had no idea that McKinney-Vento was a thing.
Yeah.
You had more information about that than you did about services for youth that were in your situation at the time. And that all came from youth. Now it's taken us a while, but I'm really glad that we're finally kind of get to the point where we're getting this video started actually. So that's going to be really neat. Well, I'm really just grateful for your time and grateful for your experience here. And it sounds like if I could sum up our conversation, that you would recommend that adults who wanted to kind of check their adultism a little bit, get started with is just listen to the things that young people are telling you and believe them.
Mm-hmm.
What else?
Yeah. Listen, and then also it's not a one and done thing. It is a continuous process, and that's not just with adultism. It's any type of advocacy or being an ally. It's just it is an ongoing thing. You always kind of have to check yourself, and then when you do those adultist things, you hold yourself accountable, say, I did that, I am sorry, and you change that pattern of behavior. So main takeaway is listening to youth when youth are telling you something, and continuously listening to youth when they are telling you something.
That is beautiful. And I think that's definitely a real key takeaway for the educators and caring professionals and nonprofits that I work with. Listen to the people that you serve, especially our youth. And when we're claiming to serve youth really need to be the leading partners in that conversation, for sure. Victoria Ann, I'm just really grateful for your time today. And again, we spent some time today on this episode of TGS, Transform, Grow, Succeed, with Victoria Ann Tullercash, Youth Engagement Specialist at Youth on Their Own, a local Tucson nonprofit that serves all of Southern Arizona's youth who lack a safe, permanent place to live and graduating high school. And again, Victoria Ann, it's been such a pleasure. Thanks so much for being on today.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning into our show today. I hope you learned a thing or two. I would like to send my heartfelt thanks to our guests for their insightful conversation and important dialogue about this topic. If you have enjoyed our show, please share and give us a rating on the podcast platform you're listening to us on. For more information about me or about the show, please visit us online at https://tgseducationalconsulting.com. Until next time, this is Tim Gravoy wishing you continued transformation, growth, and success.